Carlos Silva, the man has broken his silence. He's ready to talk now about the yanking of specific talent from matches involving AEW performers over the last month. This affected Moose, this affected Leon Slater, and this affected Nick Nemeth. So he was on Busted Open Radio today and asked about the decision to pull talent and get a bit of a sense of what exactly caused this decision and the reaction online.
Look, all these business decisions are tough, and I don't like being called a little bitch on social any more than anyone does. And it's never,
I hear it every day. It's okay.
Never happened. But it's okay. You do take the goods with the bads, and you got to make some hard decisions. My job sometimes is to make hard decisions. And for the fans and for all of you and for, Mike and, our locker room, we're going to make decisions that are good for TNA. And we got to protect TNA as Kevin Plank and Under Armour used to say, you got to protect this house. And it's a real slogan. And we've had some other folks come at us, and they've moved into, our nights. They've made some decisions. They've tried to block us in arenas and venues, and that stuff's real and it's out there, and it's okay because everyone's got to make the decisions for their business. But we're also just not going to lie down and not make decisions that are good for our business. And unfortunately, sometimes those decisions are tough, and we're very thoughtful about them, and we try to do the best to make good when we have to make those decisions. And in the case of Nick and Leon and a few of the matches that had to get shut down, we tried to make good and make calls and take care of the business as best we could.
Was it your decision to be made? Was it like
it was? Yeah, it was my decision. Yeah, I take full ownership. Look, I've got a great team, and we talk about these things together. But sometimes I'm the guy that has to make that decision, and then you move on, and you sort of go to work the next day, and you work hard again and get stuff done.
So a few things from that comment. Again, that was Carlos Silva on Busted Open Radio. So first of all, it certainly gives credence to the reporting that he was viewing like Collision airing on the odd Thursday as like stepping onto their turf. He really didn't give any sort of vagueness about this. The term that was used by TNA was partner conflicts. And ultimately, like, he really did not pass the buck here that this was like some decision made by WWE. We don't know necessarily whether there's merit to that or not, but he's certainly not sharing that in any way. The Collision thing is really weird because, number one, this is hardly the first time Collision has had to move to a Thursday. Number two, as every single person would understand, like, that's out of AEW's control when they're getting bounced around because of the NCAA tournament and they're put on a Thursday. Number three being that when these TV negotiations were going on and Carlos Silva is being asked about, would you move to Wednesday nights? He said, yeah, I would move to Wednesday nights. So, I mean, it just seems a little odd that you were more than, and again, that would have been your broadcaster. Like, AMC would be dictating where you're going on the schedule. And if they ended up on a Wednesday night, that would be AMC's call to make. But the idea here that we're just not going to lay down, again, AEW didn't lose anything out of this. You harmed WrestleCon, you harmed Create a Pro, you harmed, well, I'm not going to say they harmed necessarily Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, but it did screw up a match that they were getting prepared to announce, so I would put them under that category as well. Like, and it affected your performers that, you guys were advertised for these matches and they were not able to deliver these matches. So I hardly looked at this as some shot against AEW. In fact, it was AEW that came out of as like the good guys in this whole thing because they saved the main event on the Hitchcock show. They gave them more talent to work with. So anyway, those are a bunch of my thoughts.
Well, most of all, he harmed TNA. I think he harmed TNA way more than I think WrestleCon hurt. Way more than certainly Create a Pro and certainly MLP hurt. He gave a ton of bad press for his own company and his own product by making a decision like this. And you are maybe, if I can read into your answer, perhaps implying that, what are we to question whether or not Carlos Silva is hiding the truth?
I don't have any evidence that this was a WWE call. All we can go on is what he has said, and listen, even if this were something that WWE was insisting upon, it's still on Carlos Silva. Like, you are making the decision for your company, and you're deciding to work with a WWE. So, like, again, we don't have that definitive proof that this was a WWE call. Let's just take Carlos Silva at his word that he was upset about, whether it was the Impact Collision 1 hour head-to-head that they had. Again, like, the call here, I think everyone would have realized, okay, you don't want your talent facing AEW performers. Fair enough. But these matches are announced. These matches are going to take place. And from that point on, after this Create a Pro show, which is this weekend, after that, everyone knows the score. So these matches are not going to get booked. So no harm, no foul. But once these matches were announced, I think there was a certain onus to deliver them. And rightfully so. TNA got a lot of negative feedback as a result for this. And this took quite a while for Silva to address it on top of it.
Right. But one person who was not afraid to outright call Silva a liar for this response was MJF, who tweeted, "I think it's cool that you could just lie," before proceeding to, talk about tonight's edition of Dynamite. But
he's learned from Tony Khan.
That's right, yeah. I do also want to address his response in saying that he tried his best to deliver a make goods for these companies. And I'm curious to know what he means specifically by that, because we know through WrestleCon that WrestleCon had really no contact with Carlos Silva.
WrestleCon heard nothing from Carlos Silva. We spoke to Michael Bocchicchio on the Tuesday before WrestleCon. He had heard nothing. And listen, the bare minimum was Leon Slater could wrestle on that show. Leon Slater did not wrestle on that show. So
Bocchicchio had to find out through, I believe,
Dave Meltzer.
And then through the manager for confirmation. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he first learned about the booking being canceled by Dave Meltzer, and then, it was Bocchicchio that had to do the legwork to confirm this.
So then he had to rebook another match himself, and that's when Silva finally reached out to make plans to talk. And by the time you and I spoke to him, that meeting still hadn't occurred. Silva hadn't negotiated the time to talk to Bocchicchio. So that was several days out from the announcement of even like the new match. And that to me does not feel like somebody trying their best at trying to deliver a make good for the situation. We now know that they did have that conversation, and that's when Silva asked, what can we do to remedy the situation? Bocchicchio told him, pay for the flight, pay for the hotel. But that came days after all of this already went down. So what exactly do you mean by we tried our best? Or did we just do it because we eventually got to it? I nothing about this, I think makes TNA and certainly Carlos Silva look good.
Yeah, I didn't hear the whole interview, but I would have asked specifically, well, what are the partner conflicts that you are citing here? And those questions as well, what was done as a make good here? Because again, you can have your animus toward AEW, fine. But again, the target of this decision, it did not affect AEW. This was not a shot toward AEW. This harmed these independent companies that, in the High Spots case, I know for a fact, they got sign off from everybody. This was announced, and then they pulled it. And I imagine it was the same with Create a Pro as well. They went through the channels, they got this approved, they announced this, they sold tickets based off these announcements, and then they got yanked. So you only did harm to your brand and these independent companies. If the Post Wrestling Cafe were to undergo a drug test in the month of May, we would be testing positive because we are overloaded with content. We are going to be reviewing Hulk Hogan, Real American, all 4 episodes this month. Plus, we will go inside the Manosphere with a review of the latest Louis Theroux documentary. We will also have coverage of the Ronda Rousey-Gina Carano fight, also taking place on Netflix. Rewind Away tackles WCW Super Brawl 2, and we cover NXT TakeOver Brooklyn from 2015. All that, plus all of the XL editions on a weekly basis, Collision Course, Daredevil Born Again, and so much more. It can all be yours at postwrestlingcafe.com. $8 gets you in the door.